morning, everyone. I am Dr. Melissa Joyce P. Rambuanga, Publicity Committee Chair of Ako Para sa Bata 2020. The 12th Ako Para sa Bata is presented by the Child Protection Network Foundation and UNICEF. Our theme this year is Care of the Child Against Violence in the Time of Disease. I am happy to introduce to you the chair and moderator of the session on online safety of children during COVID-19 pandemic. He is the Senior Advocacy Officer of Stairway Foundation. He has been working with key government agencies in the Philippines via national level councils and working groups, advocating for child protection policy and programmatic changes. One of the projects he helped initiate is the Cyber Safe program, which is currently adopted by the Department of Education as part of its child online protection response. He has been working on the issue of child online protection for more than a decade. Our dear Ako Para sa Bata community, let us all welcome the chair and moderator of this webinar, Mr. Israel Ace Diloy. Over to you, Sir Ace.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mel. Isang makabatang araw po sa ating lahat. Happy National Children's Month. Welcome to webinar number 18 of the Ako Para sa Bata International Conference, Online Safety of Children during the COVID-19 pandemic. So to those who joined the previous Ako Para sa Bata webinars, welcome back. We are glad that you are able to join us for today's webinar. For the first-timers, welcome to the Ako Para sa Bata community, a very tight-knit community of child protection advocates across the country, across the Philippines. We are at we are full capacity right now here at Zoom, and we are joined by many others via the Facebook live stream. So thank you again. Thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of the Child Protection Network Foundation, UNICEF, and Stairway Foundation, we are deeply grateful for your continued support to the Ako Para sa Bata Conference. Ako, tayong lahat para sa bata. So this is the 18th conference. So this is the 18th webinar of the Ako Para sa Bata 2020, and we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing community quarantine measures has greatly affected children's mobility, limiting their opportunities for face-to-face interactions with their peers. And of course, the shift to distance learning has also contributed to the increase in children's usage of the internet, regardless of the learning delivery modality. As much as technology is being used to offset the effects of the pandemic, we already know that there are certain safety issues that children are facing in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have to really discuss these safety issues right now. So in this session, we aim to particularly discuss these following objectives. Number one, we want to talk about the various child online protection concerns brought about or amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. Number two, we want to introduce the concept of the offline to online continuum in the child online protection. Number three, we also want to provide specific examples of how technology companies like Facebook are addressing child online protection concerns in the time of the pandemic. How did they adjust their strategies and interventions in this very specific time? And last but not the least, we want to hear insights from young people on how they are navigating the online world in the context of the pandemic. So this will be a very interesting discussion and webinar, and we will be joined by an esteemed panel of guests who will share their thoughts about the subject. Now, I will introduce our first speaker. She is a professional research fellow of the Institute for Culture and Society at the Western Sydney University in Australia. And she is also the co-director of the Young and Resilient Research Center. She is also a faculty associate of Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. She is an international expert in child-centered participatory research, and her work investigates children's technology practices, focusing on marginalized groups and rights-based approaches. She has led child-centered projects to understand children's experiences of the digital age in over 70 countries, working with partners across corporate, government, and nonprofit sector, as well as, very important, children and young people themselves. She will share her thoughts on how the COVID-19 pandemic, has affected children's sense of safety in the online space. Um, she will also bring into the discussion global perspectives regarding the issue, and she will journey with us to think on how this reflects back into our own local setting. A dear colleague, an esteemed lecturer, a great but development professional. Everyone, let us all welcome Professor Amanda Third. I am turning over the session to Professor Amanda. Everyone, let's welcome Professor Amanda. Amanda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ace, for your lovely introduction. I'm very, very pleased to be part of this event, and thank you very much to the organising committee for making this possible. Fantastic. So, enormous thanks, first of all, to the organising committee of Ako Parasabata and the Stairway Foundation for this lovely invitation to speak to you all today. And thank you for all of you who've made time in your day to attend. Not just for turning up today, though, but for your ongoing work in the field of child protection. I think never before has the importance of your work been so obvious. Very early in the life of the current pandemic, it was clear that in comparison with other populations, like the elderly, children are not particularly vulnerable to contracting COVID-19. Even so, this crisis has impacted children enormously all around the world, and we've seen that here in this region too. One significant effect of the pandemic has been that children are spending much more time online. And of course, we have to qualify that acknowledgement with the other acknowledgement that, of course, not all children have regular and reliable access to technology. And this raises a very important set of issues about how those children have been affected during the pandemic, that of course is unfolding in a digital age. There's a very real possibility that crises such as the present one will further marginalise those children who are already disconnected from the digital world. But for many children, technology has been a more prominent part of their everyday lives in the context of the pandemic. And I want to think today about the consequences for child safety of this massive increase in technology use by children. I'm going to start at the pointy end of the pandemic's impact on children, thinking about, first of all, our most vulnerable children. But later in this presentation, I'm going to also think about those children who have been affected more generally, more broadly, those who are conventionally considered less vulnerable. We in the child protection community have known for a very long time that violence against children, including violence online, is a serious problem and that not enough is being done to prevent and address it. But if there's one benefit of the pandemic, and here I want to be very clear, I don't want to minimize the distress and hardship that the pandemic has caused all around the world. But if there is one benefit, it's been that it's highlighted some of the seriousness of these problems of child online protection. And as a consequence, these issues are beginning to get some serious attention from policymakers and technology corporations and many others. And this is a great thing, even if it has taken a global pandemic to highlight it. Nonetheless, though, across the region and internationally, there are deep concerns that one of the effects of the pandemic is to expose children to increased and, in some cases, very serious levels of violence. So we've seen, for example, sharp increases across the region in the numbers of children who are reaching out to helplines. We've seen a fourfold increase in child online sex abuse cases in the Philippines since the onset of the pandemic. And we've also seen a heightened risk of economic exploitation of girls in the region. Of course, there's a lot of pressure on families, and technology has facilitated the economic exploitation of young women in particular. So these are some of the very negative effects, if you like, of technology on child safety. And the child protection community is particularly concerned about the impacts on girls, particularly those who already were living in violent family situations prior to the pandemic. Escalating levels of health and economic stress combined with social isolation are fueling violence in families. At the same time, because of the constraints on being able to move around and have physical contact with other people, many children's access to health and protection services has been disrupted. And because these children are trapped at home under the close eye of perpetrators of family violence, they're subject to increased levels of surveillance from perpetrators, and this is compounding the effects of that violence. So clearly there's a lot more that we can do. And clearly technology is a part of the problem, but I want to argue that it can also be part of the solution. But this needs governments, technology providers, health and child safety professionals, teachers, parents, and many others to work together to develop solutions. We need a whole of community approach. But most importantly, it's critical that this work to harness technology for good in the time of a pandemic is guided by children's own insights and experiences. And I'll come back to that point shortly. But I think what we've seen in the pandemic is that there is a deep interconnection between the online world and the offline world. And indeed, the fact that our most vulnerable children, those children who experience social, economic, and geographic hardship, those are the children who are most vulnerable to these serious forms of exploitation online. And what this shows is that the online world and the offline world are deeply interconnected. And again, I'm going to come back to this point in a moment. But in addition to the impacts on very vulnerable children, how have other children been experiencing the pandemic? How are the increases in their technology use impacting them? And what can we do to support them? Throughout the pandemic, there's been a strong emphasis in managing the medical dimensions of COVID-19 and our response. But for children, just as for adults, in fact, the pandemic has been much more than a health crisis. It has been, and it continues to be, and it probably will be for some time to come, a crisis in their social world. Emerging research shows that for many children, the pandemic has meant they've experienced an unprecedented disruption to their everyday routines, their relationships, their sense of security, certainty, and their fundamental safety. The confidence that comes from predictable routines or the reliable comfort of strong and stable parents and relatives has been thrown into disarray. In fact, in some work that we've been doing in the city of Valenzuela with children and members of the CSWDO, we've been exploring children's perceptions of violence, and we've been trying to develop ways to measure how well our violence prevention efforts are going, both online and offline. Are they actually reducing the violence in children's lives? And in the process of that, what we've discovered is that safety for children is a lot about their social relationships, which is to say that children draw their sense of safety from the relationships with others, whether they are family, friends, teachers, healthcare workers, and so on. Their sense of safety is fundamentally social. It's also highly dependent on their routines and the structures in their lives. And of course, the pandemic has thrown all of this into disarray. So children, because their relationships have been disrupted, their routines have been disrupted, already we can say that their sense of safety is feeling very challenged at this point in time. Compounding those things, of course, children have been exposed to streams of information of different qualities via social media and video sharing platforms, but also via other forms of media like the news media. And of course, they've heard things, snippets of conversations, often whispered or very nervous, between the parents and carers that surround them. So it's no wonder then that children are reporting heightened distress. So what have children's concerns been during the pandemic? Well, it turns out that actually the fear that they themselves or a member of their family might contract COVID-19 is very low down the list of children's concerns. Rather, the things that children worry about are these kinds of things. Firstly, they're experiencing a heightened sense of worry, stress, feeling trapped, frustration, anger, sadness, loss, and grief. And they often say that they don't know how to deal with what are new and often very powerful emotions. They're also experiencing disconnection from their peer networks. And for many, of course, the connection with their peers is a really vital source for their well-being and their resilience. They're also experiencing troubles connecting or adapting to online education. And of course, much of the shift to education online in our region has taken place at a very fast pace. And it often hasn't been guided by the really deep thinking about how to maximize technology for children's education in this time. And this is something we need to think much more carefully about because children are really struggling. They also talk about family tensions caused by being in very close quarters with the same people day in and day out. And these are often exacerbated by pressures in families, financial pressures, job losses, unstable businesses, unstable work or business closures. And they have many other similar kinds of concerns. So in amidst this though, it's really important to remember that for many children, the one thing that has provided them with an ongoing sense of continuity and connection has been technology. Technology has really helped to structure children's everyday lives, give them meaning and purpose and a way of connecting with others. It's enabled them to maintain those relationships with peers, to stay engaged with their schooling. And it's also, very importantly, and something that's often underestimated by adults, it's given them a really important platform for play, entertainment, and relaxation, which has been really important during the pandemic because, of course, it's been a very stressful time for everyone. But at the same time, what we know is that just by virtue of being online, more children are at risk of harm. Because we know that the research around the world shows that the more time children spend online, the more risks they're likely to encounter. It's also, so we have to take this very seriously. And we also need to remember in this context that for many children in this region, they go online first and foremost via a mobile phone. And mobile phones often feel to parents like devices that are very difficult to monitor. And parents often say that because their children are online via a mobile phone, they find it very challenging to make sure that they can support their children in the right kinds of ways. And it makes us feel a bit helpless as parents. So I think many parents are struggling with the idea that their children might be exposed to risks online during the pandemic, and they're not really that sure what they can do about it. So we need to get much better at communicating with parents about how to best support their children and giving them the resources to do so. And indeed, what we have seen is that there have been increased numbers of reports about children being exposed to things like cyberbullying, harmful content, and misinformation. Now, if I just pop back a few slides, what we know, oops, sorry, no, I'll go forwards. Sorry, apologies. What we know is that even though being online more increases the chance that children are exposed to risks of harm, we also know that being online more gives children more opportunities to develop the kinds of skills they need to manage those risks of harm. And this is really, really critical. It's not that, it's not that we need to eliminate all the harms by switching screens off. This is not a good solution. What we need to do is to encourage children to be online and to support them slowly as they develop the necessary skills in order to be able to manage those harms, but also to really maximize the opportunities of being online. And research shows around the world that there are lots and lots of wonderful opportunities to be found online, whether they are strengthening children's relationships with others, right through to having access to resources that enable them to learn both at school and out of school hours. There are lots and lots of wonderful benefits to being online. So it's not that we should stop children from being online, but what we need to do is to make sure that their time online is spent productively and that they have the opportunity to take risks in supported ways and develop those necessary skills. So the key here is that we're not trying to eliminate harm. We are trying to eliminate harm. We're not trying to eliminate risk. Actually, risk has a very interesting relationship to both harm and benefit. What we know is that if children take risks, they can either lead to harms or to benefits. Indeed, in order to get the benefits, children need to take some supported risks. And what we need to do is we need to ensure that the risks that they take don't translate into harms. We also need to be very clear with our children that it's okay to make mistakes. A lot of our messaging around safety online for children focuses in on the fact that children have a digital footprint, and we tell them that their mistakes will follow them for the rest of their lives. This is simply not the case. Yes, there are problems with leaving a digital footprint. We need to be careful that we don't want to, not to share things. Children shouldn't share things that will later on be embarrassing or cause them other forms of discomfort. But at the same time, we need to hold open a space for our children to take risks, make mistakes that enable them to learn and to integrate those learnings into their practices in an ongoing way. But I think one of the big challenges under the pandemic has been that, of course, children have been spending a lot more time online and they haven't always had a lot of opportunity to do that constructive learning with the right kinds of support around them. So again, one of the things we really need to pay attention to if we're going to minimize the harms to children of this increased engagement online is to support parents. They are critical in this equation in making sure that children can maximize the opportunities of technology to support them through the pandemic. So, just to emphasize that point, risk underscores harm and benefit. It can lead in either direction, and we have to be careful to really nurture children and help them to make decisions and learn and take those learnings forwards. So what do we need in order to support children and enable them to maximize the benefits of their technology use during a pandemic? So first of all, we need to really centre children's own ideas about what constitutes safety and harm in our work with children. Children often actually don't think of the same kinds of risks that adults think of when it comes to being online. For children, they do worry about things like cyberbullying or attacks on their privacy, or indeed being groomed by a stranger. But their primary concerns are they're much closer in scope. They worry primarily about the social drama that goes on online. For them, the difficult conversations they have with peers, the ways that they have to manage difficult interactions, these are the things that concern them the most. And so we have to really focus in on children's sense of what constitutes a risk, and to connect our messaging about the risks to children's own sense of what needs to shift and change. And arguably, it's only by addressing what we as adults often think of as more minor risks that we can attune children to the potential for more serious risks of harm. So what I mean by that is that what we need to do is we need to really listen to children. We need to address the concerns that they are facing. And by doing that, we can then expand their understanding of safety and harm online, and enable and empower them with the knowledge to tackle the more serious issues. But we have to start with children's experiences themselves. Also, we need to tailor our information to children's concerns. We need to remember that during the pandemic, much of the information that children have come across online and used to navigate the pandemic and inform their understandings has come from social media. And I think actually there have been a lot of concerns that children are exposed to misinformation. But there are also a lot of very, very good resources out there for children that explain the pandemic and the health impacts. And we need to make sure those resources are being surfaced for children on the platforms that they engage in. But we also need to give children a lot more information about the pandemic. And in particular, we need to address those very real concerns that I outlined earlier that they say are worrying them. The pressures on their families, the fact that they are disconnected from peers, the fact that they're struggling to learn online. Our information to children needs to get much better at addressing those concerns, because it's only by doing so that we can really support the mental health and well-being of children. We also, as I mentioned earlier, need to make sure that as we transition education and other leisure time activities online, that what we do is we really think carefully about what it means to be online, what it means to learn online, what it means to interact online. It's not simply the case that we can just upload everything we would normally do online and it's going to work. We need to really think about what are the strengths of technology, how do we maximize it? And by doing that, what we do is we build children's sense of technology as meaningful. It builds children's sense of trust because they see adults working hard to support them. And these things feed into children's sense of safety. We also, as I've said, need to really work harder to support parents. Parents are struggling. And parents need good information and resources to help them guide their children. We need to provide them with very simple tools like how to start conversations about with their children, about how their children can keep themselves safe online. But we also need to be careful about the messaging that we put out through mainstream media, because of course a lot of the mainstream media coverage is quite alarmist, and it fuels parents' sense of panic and their sense that they haven't got the resources to manage the risks of harm. What we need to do is get much better at reminding parents that the online and the offline are not distinct spaces. Children themselves do not distinguish in the same ways that adults do between the online and the offline. They live out their lives across online and offline spaces. And what this means is that if parents are working hard, if they're having conversations with their children, if they're reinforcing their family's values in offline spaces, around the dinner table, out in the garden, at the supermarket, they are also reinforcing those values for their children when their children go online. Children do not go into a moral vacuum when they go online. They translate their moral frameworks between online and offline spaces. And I think we need to remind parents about this, because parenting for the digital future is just about parenting. And by encouraging parents and reminding them that they are already doing a good job and they just need to do more of what they're doing, I think what we'll do is we'll reduce some of the tension and stress that parents have, and this will have knock-on effects for children's own experiences of technology. So I think the very last thing I recommend we do is keep our faith. I think as long as we keep working hard and we keep children's concerns at the very centre of everything we do, we are going in the right direction. I want to just conclude by quickly reflecting on a couple of things. I think for many of us, the pandemic has registered as a crisis. Actually, the word crisis comes from the Greek, but in the original meaning, the emphasis of the word crisis is not on the cataclysmic event, it's not on the disruption. Rather, the definition centres on the process of taking the necessary decisions to deal with that disruption. Crisis demands that we envisage the change we want to see and then pursue it aggressively. So, as we take decisions about the important role that technology has to play in navigating the pandemic, now is the time to centre children's safety. But we must also think much more ambitiously and creatively about how to harness technology to support children's well-being. We have to address the needs of our most vulnerable children, but we must also think about how to ensure that we're creating the very best, most supportive and constructive technology environments for all children. This is the moment to enact the internet that we want for our children. Lastly, COVID-19 will be a formative experience for this generation of children. However, it's unlikely to be the only major crisis that shapes children's sense of the world and their well-being and safety. For Australian children, the pandemic was immediately preceded by the national emergency of devastating bushfires. For children in the Pacific, the pandemic was followed by vicious cyclones or typhoons. In Cambodia and Vietnam, catastrophic floods are currently compounding the effects of the pandemic. In short, as we make decisions about how to address this crisis, we have to be careful not to constrain our thinking just to this crisis. We have to use this moment to think expansively about how to address the intersecting crises that affect the lives of children, both now and into the future, and both those crises that confront us starkly and also those that burn more slowly, like the climate crisis. Because if children's rights are challenged now, this is not a temporary situation. And if we're clever, if we're thoughtful, and if we mobilise collaboratively across sectors with children at the centre of everything that we do, we can seize technology as a vital tool in strengthening the resilience and well-being of children everywhere. Many of the technology-based strategies we've put in place to sustain life under the pandemic have been assembled quickly and without due attention either to the risks or the opportunities for children's safety and well-being. Now, more than ever, despite the urgency of the issues that we confront, we have to pause and step carefully. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm going to leave you with a slide. Oops. No, I'm not. I'll share some resources via our chat shortly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for that very meaningful sharing. Many of the messages that Amanda shared really resonated with me personally, working on this issue in the Philippines for a few years already. Okay, so now let's listen to our next speaker. Okay, so she is Facebook's head of policy for Asia and the Pacific. Prior to joining Facebook, she spent over a decade working on the issues of human trafficking and online child sexual exploitation. Most recently, she was also the founding chief executive of the Australian partner of global anti-trafficking NGO IJM, or International Justice Mission, who works on strengthening the response system of justice systems to protect the vulnerable across the region. She has also led IGM's team of lawyers prosecuting human trafficking cases in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka in India, and worked for the Australian federal government prosecuting online child sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and child sex tourism cases. She is she will share with us very specific measures Facebook has taken to ensure that children and young people in their platform have a safe experience amidst the challenging situation brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, let us all welcome Amber Hawks from Facebook, the head of safety policy for Asia and the Pacific. Over to you, Amber.
Thank you so much, Ace, and everyone. It's just a pleasure to be here and be able to share with you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen and we'll see how we go. Hopefully you've got our screen here. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you, Ace, and thank you so much to Amanda for such an informative presentation. I always enjoy hearing you speak, Amanda. I'm going to today focus on sharing some of the efforts that we've taken during the pandemic in terms of child safety and well-being, and also to place that within the scope of our broader work on child safety, as there are probably some people here on the call who haven't heard all about our work in this area yet, and hopefully it will tie in well, I hope, with what Amanda has already shared, and really looking forward to answering your questions at the end as well. So just as a theme setter, the way that we approach safety at Facebook is a 5-point approach. So we begin with our policies, and that's our community standards, what is and isn't allowed on the platform. We look at our tools, so that's the tools that users have to control their own experience, and also the artificial intelligence and machine learning that runs in the background, and then our resources as well, which is support and information that we surface for users on their journey of offering as they're using our services, for them to be supported and enhance their safety. And we do all of this with partnerships. So with Stairway Foundation and our other partners, such as the Child Rights Network across the Philippines, really informing all of our policies, tools, and resources. So as I mentioned, the community standards are really the backbone of the policies. Here are some of the policies you can hopefully see on the screen that give you a sense of what are the policies across the range of topics that our community standards cover that relate to child safety in particular. Now, our community standards are global in operation, and so they're not specific for each individual country or context, and they need to be able to protect minors wherever they are around the world. Impersonation's critical, of course, because we know that, and authentic identity, because we know that people who do not use their authentic identity are much more likely to engage in abusive activity online. Health misinformation, as Amanda mentioned, I included this here because quite rightly, health misinformation has, an impact on all of us, parents as well as children, and we are well aware from our partners and expert research that that kind of misinformation can obviously have an impact on a child's well-being if they're to view it, but also on their well-being in the family environment if it's causing stress or alarm to parents as well. So of course we want to reduce that kind of misinformation. So just an update in terms of our work during the pandemic in this space. By April alone, we had directed 2 billion people globally to credible health information through our product changes. But even directing people to that information is one thing. Preventing the spread of misinformation is another thing. What we've done is adapt our policies to ensure the prevention, to prevent the spread of COVID-related misinformation. So, for example, we will remove harmful content such as claims that you can cure COVID by drinking bleach, for example, or that physical distancing doesn't help, because we know that these are really critical to people's safety. And then when there are claims that are borderline in terms of whether they're misinformation or not, we know that in the pandemic, the medical research is constantly developing. We actually partner with fact checkers around the globe who operate in over 50 languages to determine whether certain claims are credible. And if they don't violate our policies for removal, we'll actually label them with warnings and what is called downranking them, which will mean that people can't actually, the distribution is much lower. And where we've found that people have actually accessed misinformation that we have then subsequently removed, so some of those really harmful claims, will then surface pop-ups and to direct them to myth-busting credible health information from the World Health Organization. Graphic violence is obviously a really important policy because we don't want children to be, minors to be exposed to harmful content on the platform. I will note that under 13s aren't allowed on our services. And so when I'm referring to minors and the applications of these policies, I'm referring to 13 to 18-year-olds. We have a comprehensive policies restricting nudity on the platform. We don't allow the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. This is colloquially sometimes referred to as revenge porn, but of course it is much broader than that, because that revenge is not the only reason that this kind of content is shared, and pornography is not the best way to describe the imagery that we're talking about in that situation. We have zero tolerance for child exploitation content on the platform. This includes imagery of child sexual activity or child nudity, but it also includes grooming. So any kind of adult to minor solicitation or minor to minor solicitation, it also includes, and we have zero tolerance for that. We have policies against human trafficking, and I highlighted here bullying and harassment and suicide and self-injury, because these are two policies that, along with our child exploitation policy, the enforcement of these has been so critical in this COVID season. When we look at bullying and harassment, it's a comprehensive policy that has increased protections for minors, as we know that they're more vulnerable. We've also had to, when we enforce this policy, context is king. And so we rely on user reports and our teams of content reviewers to look at it. And we also take into account things like bullying and harassment that may have derived from a COVID situation, such as it could come across as someone claiming that someone has been is a carrier of COVID or has been diagnosed or behaved in a certain way, and this can actually be a part of bullying and harassment, and so we take that into account. I highlight suicide and self-injury too, because these policies are really critical. We need to ensure that content on the platform that minors are viewing that would put them at risk, either in triggering their own thoughts of self-harm or giving ideas as to how to actually execute that, especially when they are experiencing increased levels of stress. In the Philippines, in recent months, we've seen many articles in the news, unfortunately, too many about minors who have hurt themselves or taken their own lives due to the stress in this season and related to their education as well. It's really important that we don't allow the proliferation of material that is simplifying the causes of suicide and self-harm and proposing something like self-harm as a solution to a personal problem that so many people can that they might relate to. And so we take that very seriously as well in enforcing those policies at this time, and as always. You may have noticed from what I just said there that the way we detect this violating content is through user reports, but also through our technology. And each time it's detected, it's reviewed by trained teams who speak local language as well, and they follow, they operate on a follow the sun model, working 24/7 to review content. Now, that technology is really critical as we seek to continue protecting children at this time. We use photo and video matching technology to detect child exploitation imagery and prevent it being reshared. And we use it to detect not only known imagery, but new child nudity and previously unknown child exploitative content when it's uploaded. We use the technology to also prioritize reporting that out to law enforcement. The way we get those reports to law enforcement is to report it through the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children in the US, who then report out to law enforcement around the world, including in the Philippines. The technology can also, through keywords and various other mechanisms, identify inappropriate interactions with children. So this is grooming. And we are constantly working also with our partners to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information to ensure that those classifiers are ever improving in the way that they can detect any kind of harmful interactions. You can see here, this is our latest community standard enforcement report, which gives you a sense of how things are transpiring in the COVID era. Although I will say that our next quarterly report that comes out will, I think, also have more things to say about what's been going on online and in the enforcement space. So stay tuned for that one. Here you can see that still, as we've had to use our technology and continue to enforce in these policy areas, that the technology has been able to detect in the 90s, 98, 99% of the violating content before users report it, and then bring it down. So you can see there for child exploitation imagery that we removed 9.5 million images in that quarter, and 99.3% of it was detected before it was reported. You will note here, though, that bullying and harassment is significantly lower. Of course, that's because that requires very context-specific understanding, and so we really do rely on user reports to be able to detect bullying and harassment. The more that users report in that space, the better the technology will become. And so we will continue to rely on that because it's very difficult. What might be a bullying comment for a teen in one circumstance, or it might be excluding them from something, it might be shaming them in some particular way, requires quite some insight into the context of the situation. And I will note here that during the COVID season, you may have read that Facebook has over 15,000 people dedicated to content review. And in this time, a lot of those reviewers, of course, had to be sent home and they could not operate. This became critical that we needed to move to more automation, but also we needed to ensure that the safety topics were prioritized. So things like suicide and self-harm and topics like child exploitation were prioritized and are still prioritized. And so we actually transitioned the review of much of this type of content to not only our contracting review force, but to our full-time employees, who more of them took over that and then have been working consistently to bring back online as a matter of priority more people who can review that content, because we can't have people reviewing child exploitation content and seriously sensitive content in their own homes without the security and the wellbeing infrastructure around them to do that. So COVID has thrown up challenges for all of us, and we continue to work to do our best in this situation. as more people can get back into their working environments too. One of the other things we've updated is our safety in search. So this is where we provide education when people search for terms relating to child exploitation. And you can see here, I think this links back to what Amanda was saying about the information that children are given about the risks that they're taking, or minors are given, and adults are given, is critical. And in partnership with researchers from the UK, we updated this messaging here on this safety notice, and we are seeing it have impact to actually explain, not only is viewing this kind of content illegal, but it actually goes on to explain, that viewing the image actually adds to the harm. And there are organizations to support you and resources to support you if you are having sexual thoughts about children. And then this resource connects people through to that. And we've invested also in this season in helping law enforcement around the world further by funding the tool that they use to receive those reports from the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, and making sure that countries around the world have access to this better tool, which really helps them to search for the information they need more effectively, and find and triage the reports, and even gives them access to look up, you can see here on the map, to locate the ISP address, for example, that is in the report, and give them more information. Really briefly on our tools, the first line of defense are privacy and safety. We have our safety tools, blocking and reporting, of course, but what's been happening in this COVID season is updating our educational tooling in Messenger, and also I would call this prevention work, really, because what we're trying to do is to decrease the chances of contact between minors and adults, or bad actors, suspicious accounts that would seek to harm another. So this is helping more than 1 million people per week at least avoid engaging in harmful connections. And what it does here is it would notify a minor account, do you know this person, and pop up that reminder, that education. If you don't know this person, you hit no. There are some things that you need to keep in mind. You can report this conversation, you can block this person, and some education on how to recognize harassment, to remind them that they're still in control, and that they can still report what's going on, and they don't have to share information. They can report, and we won't let that person know once they're reported. We also wanted to limit the spread of harmful content in Messenger. This is obviously important for the spread of health misinformation, but also for the viral spread of harmful child exploitation content as well. So messages can now only be forwarded to 5 people or groups at a time. We've updated our tools on Instagram in relation to bullying and harassment, again providing that education to teens and to everyone as they go to type a comment that this might be similar to something that's been reported in the past, and do they really want to actually type it? And that level of friction we found is having success in giving people pause and preventing them from typing violating comments. And at the same time, they can restrict accounts. So that would give, and this speaks, I think, to what Amanda was talking about in terms of the risks that youth in particular consider to be most important in their own environment. And that is that how they're perceived, whether a social situation that might be sticky at school or in an environment is going to escalate, and this tool is for that purpose. Someone is able to restrict another person's comments. That person won't be able to comment beneath their post until someone has reviewed that and then allowed for that comment to be seen. But what it does do is it prevents escalation, because it doesn't require you to block your friend or this person that you're in contact with. And I include these here knowing that Facebook is, you know, definitely the platform of choice in the Philippines, but these are the kinds of tools that we're developing that we hope to see expanding over time, even in the Facebook environment. And we launched Messenger Kids. Of course, I hope many of you know about this, that, you know, really understanding also that kids are needing to stay connected, and particularly younger kids who are under 13, needing a safe way to stay connected to family and friends at this time, and also connected with their class groups at school, in terms of, you know, updates, catch-ups, how they can just stay part of the community. And so we rolled out Messenger Kids globally very rapidly during this COVID season for that purpose. And it's a fun messaging and video chat app designed for younger kids. Ideally, I mean, the target age is between 6 and 11, for them to connect with their friends and family in a more controlled environment where parents actually have the ability to see what's going on and to supervise. So they can video chat, they can engage in age-appropriate games, all designed with input from experts. They can message, and parents can look at the activity through their Messenger app itself. The child doesn't need a Messenger account. The child has a Messenger access to a Messenger Kids app, and the adult, the parent, is able to see things through their own Messenger account, so they can control who their child connects with. They can see and allow class groups to be created, and then monitor the content, especially videos and images that are sent between kids. As I mentioned, also on the wellbeing side of things, we've provided access through our COVID Info Centre to reliable health information, but also to wellbeing resources. So how to take care of yourself, your emotional health, how to cope with stress about finances, how to navigate grief and loss, all developed with experts, and then directing people out to local helplines as well. Again, this is something that we've now navigated. It's still available in the COVID Info Centre, but we've migrated it across to a standalone area of our product that will remain called Emotional Health. And we hope that this is really helpful for people in this time. Hopefully you know about our resources. We have a safety centre and a help centre, but we've added to our resources by providing back to school guides for the use of Messenger Kids for younger children, and how to use our apps for schools. And then I'll just play here, hopefully it will work. A partnership that we engaged in with Stairway and the Child Rights Network to provide education on online safety risks in like GIF animated stories form for kids and for their parents as a conversation starter, tools for parents to talk about these kind of things with their kids while online. So let me see if this works. Oh, I don't know if that entirely worked, but basically I encourage you to look this up if you haven't seen it yet, and use it as a resource also in your work if that's appropriate. Finally, I just want to finish on the importance of partnerships in this time. We partner with over 500 organisations and experts around the world in our safety work. This partnership has been really important in the COVID season. We've pivoted our online digital citizenship training to be online now with our partners such as Plan International, and taking over sites like the Department of Education, Department of ICT sites to run our monthly training sessions, and created short animations and infographics in order to educate people. And so now we're actually seeing that over 4 million people have accessed this education now online. And so we're really grateful and hopeful that that will continue, and that people will learn more about how to protect themselves online. And a last note is to say that across industry, we're also reinvigorating. As Amanda said, there has been a turn of attention onto these issues in a reinvigorated way in the past year. And one of those things has been the Technology Coalition, which is a group of 18 leading tech companies coming together, and has existed for 15 years, but an increased investment to ensure that everything that could be done is being done to prevent child exploitation across industry. And this involves 5 pillars of collaboration, and that's information and knowledge sharing, tech innovation, as you can see here, in more research that's going to lead us to highly impactful interventions moving forward, more transparency and accountability across industry so that others can understand the efforts that are being made and can learn from them, and that information sharing can be valuable for different sectors. And then collective action, just to create more spaces for us all to come together. So whether that be government, industry, CSOs, academics and experts, to continue to discuss and make progress on how we're going to continue to protect children online moving forward. And my final note I will say there is that we've also been working closely, and will continue to do so, in the Philippines, even on the topic of regulation, to ensure that really helpful regulation is put in place to protect children, and to provide whatever information we can provide to actually ensure that that regulation is effective as well. So thanks, Ace. I raced through it, but happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amber. So one key takeaway I think from Amber's presentation is Facebook, for example, has been instituting technology solutions to also the safety issues that we're experiencing. But at the same time, we as stakeholders, we parents, adults, everyone should be familiar with these features in social media so we can maximize them. Okay, so thank you very much, Amber. We'll come back to you in the open forum part. Okay, so as everyone knows, November is National Children's Month, and as part of the celebration of the Buwan ng Bata or Children's Month, we have invited youth representatives to share their insights and reactions to these presentations. So today we are joined by Nirel. So Nirel will be sharing with us her views on the issue of online safety in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. She is currently an undergraduate student taking up a BS Public Health at UP Manila, and her view as a young person will temper the discussion as she brings in perspectives of children and young people themselves on how they are existing and thriving in the digital space during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I will not keep you. We will now give the Zoom space to Nirel to share her thoughts on the issue of online safety of children during the COVID-19 pandemic. Nirel, the floor is yours.
Thank you po, Sir Ace. So good morning, everyone. So today I'll be talking about my perspective as a youth on online safety. And later on, I'll talk about my own personal experiences as a digital native who grew up alongside the growth of the online world. So I'll also be talking about my perspective as a public health student. So first, for me, to be safe online, it means that means this. So when you have a good understanding of what the internet can do, you can take steps to keep yourself safe from illegal and unwanted content that makes you feel upset or unsafe. So, as briefly mentioned by our previous speakers, when we talk about safety, we don't only mean online. We also mean the mental health of children and the youth in relation to their usage of online platforms. So, if before we thought that the online world was a barrier to keep children safe from getting physically or emotionally hurt, times have changed. So, if children don't feel safe online, children tend to feel afraid even in real life. So, for children in the younger age, I think it's important to make them feel safe at home and give them a sense of personal security first. So, for those in the middle years, usually children are curious and develop social skills and friendships, as well as they become more prone to or receptive to a host of exclusion practices, such as gender and race stereotyping, bullying, and victimization. In the early adolescent years, there's current research on brain development during this period of life, and there's a research that supports the conclusion that adolescence is characterized by sensation seeking and higher risk taking. So I think at that age, in my early adolescent years, I felt the same way and I wanted to take more risks, um, even online. So that's why I think it's important to guide children at an early age. So I actually found the public health research conducted in 2013 from Moreno, Egan, Bear, Young, and Cox, which stated that optimal mean age to begin teaching internet safety was actually 7 years old. And it was found by majority of the stakeholders, such as teachers, clinicians, parents, and adolescents. They were able to identify parents as the primary, as having the primary responsibility for teaching this topic. So the research said that the suggested age range to teach internet safety was around 6 to 8 years old, which is actually an early part of life. So, given the current situation, though, on how society focuses on technology now, I think it's likely that children are being introduced to computers at even younger ages. Even before 6 to 8 years old. So I think children would be able to thrive and become more independent and find their sense of self in the online world if they're taught at an early age. Um, I actually have found statistics now that the National Center for Mental Health has received an average of 30 to 35 calls per day, an average, and 400 calls per month during the lockdown. So that was around March to May 2020. So in the months prior to the pandemic, the center only received an average of 13 to 15 calls daily. So the figures showed that around 30% of the callers in April and 27% of the callers in May had reported increase of anxiety. So they had increased levels of anxiety. So this is most likely going to impact children because even mental health of parents and those around the children are important to keep the children safe. So my perspective now, during this pandemic, of course, we've been challenged to find alternative platforms in order to be able to interact with their friends and loved ones. So for the youth, we've utilized different social media platforms and online group activities in order to replace the in-person interactions that we used to have. So for me, as a person who used to love celebrating my birthdays with my friends, it was a challenge for me this year to celebrate mine with my closest friends and loved ones. So this led to the idea of having an online Zoom birthday party. So aside from that, I also hang out with my close friends using servers, video chats, and actually there's this app called Discord where we pop in and out of a call. We can stream what we're doing and the others can watch, and we can even listen to music together. So majority of my age group and younger people have been using online games also as a means to form new friends or even keep social relations. So an example actually is this game, Among Us, where you can join a game with random individuals from different servers around the world, and you can talk to them and while playing in game. Uh, so in academic life, on the other hand, now that there's a rise in online learning, children have to adapt to new changes in the learning environment. So the environment mostly consists of only teachers and family members as taking on the role of educators and role models for children. So I think it's been harder for children and the youth to cope with the demands of online learning, since when teachers usually utilize assignments, quizzes, and projects as a form to verify if students actually learn. So this sometimes leads to a pile of tasks for students. No? So how do the children and the youth cope with this now that there is limited activities to be done within the home? So for me as a youth, I end up scrolling through social media, going to game sites, and I see that majority actually talk about how we feel in online media platforms. So that can be good or bad depending on the context. So children can actually thrive in online learning as they've grown up with technology within the reach, and they can also use it as a means to cope. But sometimes there comes hazards and risks online. So in relation to what Professor Amanda mentioned earlier, um, there was a recent story from the Department of Justice which reported that online sexual exploitation of children um, increased from the same time period from last year, which was only 76,561 reports. There was a 264% increase to the same time period this year. So there was the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children recorded a total of 279,166 reports. So even if there's already an existing Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009, there remains an increased rate of online child exploitation. So I'll be discussing now some of the hazards I've personally come across online as a child myself. So first are online friend requests. They don't really seem like a threat to many adults, but for children, it's quite easy to accept a friend request. So recently, I've actually cleaned my friend list on Facebook. So I've unfriended around 100 to 200 plus friends from Facebook because I didn't know them at all. So I asked myself, why was I friends with these people? You know, so as a grade schooler, when Facebook was just starting out, children my age would usually automatically accept a friend request if that person had a mutual friend, or if that person seemed to have credentials that looked legitimate or came from a school that I knew. So back then, of course, I had a Facebook account at an early age, even though I wasn't 18 yet, because I was able to ask my cousin to help me make one. You know, so to conclude, online friend requests are considered a hazard right away if children are not taught to be cautious about who to befriend online. So they could be fake identities, or even people from schools can also harm you. So even if you know their school, they can still be able to uh, harm you. So second is online identity theft. So there's a study that says adolescents frequently display personal and identifiable information about themselves on the internet. So these details can include home location, revealing photographs, or descriptions of sexual behavior. So I personally had my identity used to email someone I knew with an unknown link. So luckily, my friend was able to inform me about that situation. But I've also seen around 20 or so people from my social circle either get their identity stolen or their accounts hacked. So I think the best way to keep children or and ourselves safe from these kinds of attacks is to check privacy settings in social media platforms, and to ensure that we only keep close friends, only close friends can gain access to our information. I think I skipped one. So the third one is the unwanted sites. So there are actually unwanted pop-up ads from clickbaits. So usually there are random sites that have ads surrounding them that can actually have pornography. So this can even be present in some gaming sites. So furthermore, I've experienced myself wanting to, example, watch um, a drama online, a Korean drama, and actually clicking the play button, and a pornographic site appears right before my face. So it's like it just pops up if you click a certain button. So of course, people who are not used to the setup, um, of clickbaits, they usually panic, or in the case of children, they can get curious. So it's really best, I think, for parents to give their children a sense of what is proper and what is not proper at an early age, so that they can distinguish what's suitable for their age. I actually have found a study in 2014 by Farouk on youth internet safety. It says here that usually in traditional like face-to-face bullying, imbalance often comes in physical attributes. But then in internet bullying, power imbalance comes from a variety of ways. So, example, the bully is able to preserve anonymity for a prolonged period of time. So the fact that, example, content in the online world is not easy to delete, this can contribute to a victim's feeling of powerlessness or humiliation, which sometimes deters them from seeking help from adults. So I think the most common suggested strategy for dealing with unwanted sexual solicitations is to encourage or help the youth block the solicitor or leave the online forum in which they encountered. So, other hazards that I think children also come across is publicly posting online and having unwanted release of personal photos, as discussed earlier by our other speakers. So, as a child, um, I wasn't really as conscious with my body or what I show in photos that I used to post. So the American Academy of Pediatrics reported that children's social media use and described specific risks, such as privacy violations and cyberbullying. So a previous study found that one third of adolescents actually give their internet passwords to friends. So that actually happens even in my age group and younger people. And one fourth were unaware that content uploaded online cannot be permanently deleted. So another hazard is receiving flattery from strangers in messages. So majority of the people my age actually encounter this. Like I've discussed this with some of my peers as well. So there are some predators or solicitors who ask children to keep secrets. And I think parents should take the opportunity um, to tell children what is proper and not proper online by giving them small lessons. And I don't mean it doesn't necessarily equate to getting mad or reprimanding children, because it's going to be harder for the child to understand, but it's more on sharing and connecting with children, because I think that that's what worked for me. Like learning lessons from my parents, just tidbits from time to time, in order to know, in order to gain a sense of what is proper and not proper online. So, as a imparting note, as a youth and a public health student, I just like to end by saying prevention is always better than cure. So, by keeping our children and the youth safe online, we also give them a sense of security in real life. So, I think it's always better to talk about what can happen, than to talk about what has already happened. So thank you very much. Here are my references.
Thank you very much, Nirel, for sharing your insights and also, of course, also additional information. I really appreciate how you shared your own experiences. Thank you very much for that, and how it connected with the previous sharings of Amanda and Amber with regards to technology and how adults and children should view technology vis-a-vis online safety. For poll number 5, so this is the question: how can we ensure children's online safety? You may choose multiple answers. Number 1, get his or her social media password. Number 2, install blocking and filtering software in your home internet connection. Choice number 3, have regular conversations with children about their online activities and how to stay safe. Number 4, install spying software in children's mobile devices to monitor their online activities. And last, I don't know how to safeguard my child's online activities. Okay, so you might now enter your answers, and we will get to know your responses via the Zoom poll, and the Facebook live stream. Okay, so let's see. Are we seeing the responses? Okay, so now we have the responses. A huge 88% said that have regular conversations with children about their online activities and how to stay safe. Unfortunately, we have 19% who said installing spying software in children's mobile devices to monitor their children's online activities. Uh, as what was mentioned by our resource speakers, we have to be proactive and we have to trust children and make and facilitate calculated risks. 40% said install blocking software in your home internet connection. 17% said get his or her social media password. So the question is, what would you feel if someone got your own social media password? Okay, now moving on to the next poll, poll number 6. How do you rate your own cyber safety skills to ensure that your child is safe online? Are you excellent? Number 5, rating number 5. Do you rate yourself great? Do you rate yourself good? Choice number 3. Do you say that you are fair? Your skills are fair, or are you poor? Are your skills poor? Okay, so key in your answers now, and let us wait to see what are the results of the poll. Okay, so how do you rate your cyber safety skills to ensure that your child is safe online? Are you excellent, great, good, fair, or poor? Okay, so waiting for the answers now. Let's flash the answers. Okay, so wow, 49% that they are good. Excellent. So we want those who answered fair and poor and good to eventually, hopefully, you will develop good cyber safety skills to ensure that your own child, the children, are safe online. Now, let's go to the last poll question, poll number 7. We have to be experts in technology to be good online safety advocates. Option number 1, 100% yes. Because how can we teach children online safety if we are not tech experts ourselves? And then choice number 2, not necessarily, because a huge part of online safety is building up children's protective behavior. You may now submit your answers to this poll question. Okay, please. We are now waiting for the results. So how do we view this? Do we have to be experts in technology? 60% said not necessarily, because a huge part of online safety is building up children's protective behavior, while 40% said yes, we have, because how can we teach online safety if we're not tech experts? So let's also discuss this later on in the open forum. Okay, so now I would like to invite all of our speakers, Amanda, Amber, and Rel, to please open up your webcam and microphones for the open forum portion. Okay, so we have pre screened questions coming from the Google form links. And then we will also answer some questions from the live Zoom and Facebook webinar. Okay, so let's now go to the Google form questions. Okay, so let's go to question number 1. Next slide, please. Question number 1. So, in cybersecurity or privacy, what are the things that we need to consider? Considering that most transactions online require us to give out our basic information, like like your name, address, contract number. So the question really is, how do we protect our personal information or data, considering how online transactions are made? So I'll open the floor to any one of you who would like to answer this question. Maybe let's go to Amanda first. Amanda, do you have any insights to this?
Yes, sure. So I think the things that we commonly tell children online are, please don't share your name, your address, any personal information that might enable someone who doesn't know you to identify you. And of course, one of the big challenges about being online today is that we are constantly asked for different pieces of information. And it is actually quite easy for someone with a lot of technical expertise to put different pieces of information that might come in via different platforms that can be traced to a specific internet address together to identify you. But I think, those risks are not I think the thing that we need to do is to proceed with caution. We need to be very, very careful about how much we show, and I think you need to always be very certain that the services that you're using online are safe and secure and have good, solid privacy policies that are followed. That would be a quick answer, Ace.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for thank you, Amanda, for that. Amber, Narelle, do you have anything to add to this question?
To say yes, to think critically about the information that you're entering in, to consider whether that address, particularly an address, whether that is really required for the service that you are entering in. Sometimes providing a phone number is one thing, but providing your actual address is something, I guess, that maybe banks require and certain services, but do they really need your address to operate is a critical question. So I would just be cautious and think critically about the information that you're providing. The other thing to note too is that when you access certain sites through other sites, so if you go and use your Google account to log into another service, or hit Facebook, use my Facebook account to log into another service, you should be aware of what that does to your, I guess, to your experience on those sites and who will have access to those information. So at Facebook, you can find out all about that and control that through your privacy settings, in fact. But that's something that you should also consider, how you want to access these services.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Amber. Sorry. Nirel, can we hear from you?
I think what they both said is already apt. Like, I think we just really have to be critical on what we put. I myself just usually use my Google account actually to log in into certain other websites, and I think um, that's enough for me. Like, I don't usually give my address, so I think it's only apt to give your address like when there's a delivery or something like that. But
Mm.
I think you should I mean, for children, I think it's just best to like tell the children um about what information they can give online already.
Okay, thank you, Nirel. So two sides to it: being familiar with the tech platform component, making sure that it is secure, what we're going to, and critical thinking, trying to really understand what kind of information we share online. Is it necessary? Thank you for sharing your thoughts and answers to this. Let's move on to the next pre-screen question. So, how can we secure our school career guidance orientation sessions via Zoom from people who join even if they don't have permission to? So this is in the context of schooling in the Philippines, wherein they have what we call school career guidance orientations. This is like a homeroom program. So anyone care to answer? Who would like to start?
So this is a very straightforward one. I mean, I think Zoom does, just like Facebook and many other providers, does have a series of security settings that you can use to protect yourselves from unwanted interventions, if you like. And in the case of Zoom, I think the most basic thing we should recommend is that everybody uses a passworded Zoom session, so that when you join on the link, you have to enter a password, and the password only goes out to those people who are invited to join. Amber and Narelle may have other things to add there.
Yeah, Amber.
Yeah, I would say I'm not an expert on security at Zoom, so but I will say to educate yourself actually on all of the settings, as Amanda said. Use only passwords. If you can consider using other more secure platforms, then do that as well for certain environments, depending on what is being discussed. And always, whenever there is an option for you, if there ever is an option, you should report any kind of behavior that you see like that as well.
Great, thank you. And Nirel, as an active Zoom user, organizing Zoom birthday sessions, yeah, how do you manage to?
Yeah.
How do you keep your session safe?
I guess Zoom has its um I mean, just like Facebook, Zoom also has its private, can help us keep it private. So I think just by the fact that Zoom already has like meeting passwords is actually safe enough. We just have to be the ones who are really cautious in giving out the passwords in platforms. So, for example, even in our class, for our online learning, um, where they tell us to refrain from sending passwords and Zoom details in Messenger or in other apps. Like it's better to just use email instead
Mm.
rather than you sending it in other online platforms.
Thank you very much, Noel. So really, the key is really to understand the built-in security features of the platform we choose, but also at the same time, really implement common sense on how we manage meeting credentials, set up passwords, etc. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the next question. So, what should we do if a naked image of a minor, a child, goes viral via Facebook Messenger? So, Amber, of course,
Yeah.
this is for you.
The first thing you should do is report it. If it hasn't been taken down already, we definitely want to know about it. So I hope, as you got from my presentation earlier, that that would be completely against our policies. So please do report it when you're seeing that. If there is an account that is also posting that somewhere else, you can report either the piece of content or you can report the account as well, or the group that might be sharing that. Please report it. Once we have that reported and identified, it can't be reshared across Messenger. So I think the other part of this is people not necessarily understanding the impact of forwarding something virally or just forwarding something. So, we have the mechanism in place now of Messenger forward limit to prevent this or to minimize this, but people need to understand that it's not funny. It's not something that's just of interest. It's something that forwarding actually causes harm. And I think one of the things other than reporting that people can do is to actually step in and say, hey, don't forward this. This actually has impact on this child. Please stop forwarding it. It's re-traumatizing. And it's creating this kind of education and these norms that we all can contribute to, I think.
Thank you very much for that, Amber. And maybe even though I'm just a moderator, just to supplement, we really need to also report it to law enforcement or social welfare because this is a crime. And every time that image is reshared, it is continued victimization of that child. Okay, thank you very much, Amber, for sharing that. Next question. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so how can local government units support their constituents on children's online safety amidst this pandemic situation? Amanda, I will defer to you on this with your work in Valenzuela City.
Yes, thanks, Ace. It's a really wonderful question, and I think, this has been an enormous struggle because, of course, all the ways that local government units normally reach out to the community to provide them with forms of support have been compromised and challenged. So, it's very hard to make concrete recommendations, and obviously each local government area needs to think very carefully about the resources they've got at their disposal and how best to deploy those. But I think at the very least, sharing information via the usual channels about what about the challenges of being online for children during this pandemic is really, really critical. But I think too, you've got to do that very carefully. You can't simply run a scare campaign, for example, to say that 60% of children are receiving illicit messages or whatever. You have to be very careful about communicating information that enables people on the receiving end to really assess the size of the risk, and importantly, you need to give them information about how to respond to that risk. I do think, as I said earlier, that one of the very critical things is for us to be responding to children's concerns. So I think actually, and I would point to some really wonderful examples of communication with children during the pandemic, like, for example, the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, held a child-friendly conference for children. And at that conference, she brought along an epidemiology expert, but also a very well-known young science communicator to answer children's questions about the pandemic. Now, I think what was wonderful about that is that it communicated to children medical information and it answered their questions about the pandemic itself. But what we need to do much better is to communicate with children about the other very large transformations in their everyday lives that they're experiencing, and to remind them that they're not alone, to remind them that the local government unit is thinking about them and is wanting to hear from them about things that they can do to support children in their area. So I think I have to give a very short answer, unfortunately, but I think there's a lot that can be done using existing communication channels to really help communities have meaningful information that can help them tackle the problems. And then I think we need to think very creatively about how we work with the very few face-to-face mechanisms that we have in place in those communities to strengthen those and enhance their reach and impact.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Amanda. That's that's a very great insight with regards to how local government should address the concerns of children, but also at the same time tread very carefully to not add on to the distress of children. That's a very important point. Amber, from coming from a technology company, is there any opportunities for local government units to interface, for example, with technology companies in support of children's safety in the pandemic?
Well, yeah, I feel that like any institution or organization or we would hope that they would also utilize all of the resources that we have and the platforms we have to reach their constituents as well. So if their community is on Facebook, and then they can run a Facebook Live and just use the technology to deliver these sessions, or whether it might be through, like the example that we provided with the GIF animated stories, these ways that they can actually get information out that also have links to, locally relevant information as well if they want to localize. So just encouraging them from our perspective to also understand the technology and what can be used from their side to reach the people in their community.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Amber. Imagine that, a Facebook Live being done by the local government unit, communicating with children, having that conversation online. Fantastic. Nirel, being a youth representative, being from the youth, what's your take on this?
Well, as a public health student, though, I don't know. I've actually learned in my studies, actually this semester, on health policy and administration, in creating plans in coordination with like local government units. So I think that it would be best if like local government units also partner along with other organizations, so that it would be easier for them to relay information and to actually educate parents and children online. So yeah, that's.
Thank you. Thanks, Nirel. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're moving on to the questions from the Zoom and Facebook. Unfortunately, we're running short of time, so we have to curate questions. So the first question from the Zoom and Facebook conversation is that, how can we say that being online is harmful or beneficial? What criteria or parameters do we actually use? And I think this is very useful for a parent talking to their children to provide those parameters. So Amanda, since you brought up this idea in your talk, can you chime on this, please?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there isn't actually a simple and straightforward answer to this question. What we know is that that you can experience benefits and harms all at once, right? And it's really a matter of how you navigate that dynamic between benefits and harms, and how you try and promote behaviours that are beneficial and minimise those that lead to difficulties. I think too, broadly speaking, we shouldn't. On one level, I think we have to follow our instincts as parents on this question. I think but we also need to listen very carefully to what our children have to say and to their instincts on these questions too. I think, it's very easy for experts to say you should do this and you should do that. But at the end of the day, every child has a different relationship with technology. There are, broadly speaking, some trends, but it's about and I think also parents need to remember you won't get it right every single time. That it is a trial and error process of working out what's right for your child. But I think to go back to things that, or in fact, all of the panelists have emphasised today, it is about deciding as a parent what your values are, the kind of capacities you want your children to develop, and it's about thinking creatively about the ways that you want your children to grow up to use technology for the remainder of their life, because you are building a foundation now. I think, of course, if your child is experiencing or voicing distress about things, if they become withdrawn or stop communicating with friends and family, or you notice other visible changes that look not right to you, they're probably not right. And you probably do need to seek some advice and guidance about that. But, in the meantime, you should create space both for your child and for yourself to experiment with technology. You will work out what things work for you and what things don't work for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda, for that. Okay, so in the interest of time, it's rather unfortunate that we're running short of time, because the conversations, the discussions have been very meaningful, very excellent. So let's move on to the last portion of this discussion. Yeah, so this is the final reflection question. You need not answer it as it is. You may, just from your own thoughts, but as a guide. So the question is, how do we maximize the role of technology for protecting children in the longer term, considering that COVID-19 this pandemic will not be the last challenge we will all face. So how do we move forward from this? How do we look at technology and the protection of children? So I'll give very short, unfortunately, around a minute or so for each panelist, starting with you again, Amanda, then moving forward.
Thanks, Ace. So how do we maximise the role of technology for protecting children in the longer term? I think we need to, first of all, we need to centre children and their needs and aspirations at the heart of everything we need to do. We need to listen carefully, and we need to think and create the kinds of technologies we want to see and the behaviours we want to see alongside our children. I think as adults, one of the big things that we can do to maximise the benefits of technology for protecting children in the long term is to role model excellent behaviour. I've just done a study with 700 children internationally in 28 countries, and they have told me that they sniff a double standard between the ways that parents tell their children to use technology and the way parents themselves use technology. I think, we really need to take our role as parents very seriously and role model that technology use, both, in the sense of exhibiting for our children protective behaviours, but also grabbing hold of technology ourselves and using it to think and create and do things differently.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Amanda. Amber?
I think one of the real important things moving forward and protecting children in the longer term online is that, a lot of the technology innovation comes out of particular countries in the world and not necessarily representative of the needs and circumstances of children and communities in countries like the Philippines or in other countries. So I would love to see more of this regional voice and circumstance and cultural context and particular risks and thoughts of the children who are in these regions actually informing the design of the tech, and not just that being Western children, for want of a better word, who are informing that. That's one thing. I think also, as we've already mentioned, having the institutions, so the schools, the government units, really be across the technology, and having government investment in technology from that side is going to be really critical, because children are going to be online in those spaces, and there needs to be the reach of these institutions like schools to actually relate to the kids that they're teaching with the right kind of technology. So an investment in that space. And then finally, if we can use technology as a platform to provide the resources and spark the conversations for that online offline continuum that we've been talking about, offering up tips and tools so that parents can start the conversation with their kids, so that we're making connections for people. If we can use technology to those connections and those conversations as well, I think that would be a really great thing longer term.
Thanks, Amber. So really, I really appreciate that. Localizing and contextualizing the technology experience of children from different parts of the globe, and really taking back technology so that we ourselves are empowered to safely exist in this space. Thank you very much for that. Nirel, what's your take on this?
Um, as a youth, I think the best way that that we, people in my age group and younger people, can maximize the role of technology to protect others and the future children is actually by studying and to take initiative to be educated. So I say we focus on health education, which encompasses not only physical, of course, but also mental health. So health education empowers an individual and the communities to live healthier lives by improving not only physical but also mental, emotional, and social health, by increasing knowledge and influencing the attitudes of a person to care for their own well-being. So this means that my generation should use our experiences and perspective right now to create maybe in the future to create future policies and technological innovations in order to protect the children of the future. So
Well, yeah, thank you, Nirel, for that. I really hope that your generation doesn't make the same mistakes of our generation or the same gaps, and you bring a better future for your generation and the next one. So thank you very much, Amanda, Amber, Nirel, for sharing your knowledge, your time, your expertise in our Ako Para sa Bata webinar. Thank you very much for participating. So everyone, so remember to so just to add on to the conversation, to the resources, we would like to share some additional resources. So these are resources on cyber safety prepared by Stairway Foundation. We have the Daliri Escuela videos, which discusses several topics, which focus or follows the perspectives of what Amanda shared, that looking at risks and maximizing opportunities and benefits of the use. The next one, we also have resources on, next slide, please. Yeah, we have resources on e-learning. So the Lead Escuela also have a parents brochure. So the parents brochure, which you can download for free, tries to have a discussion with you as parents on how can you understand technology and how children use it. So not to be over paranoid about the children in the technology space. Okay. We also have resources on e-learning. So next slide, please. So we have some free e-learning courses for children. So you might want to have your children take on these e-learning courses with you. So it should be a guided participatory activity between parents and children. Okay. And next slide, please. So these are available via these links, all for free, which we will also retype in the Zoom and FB live stream. Okay. So thank you for pledging your support for children everywhere. See you again. Mabuhay and happy National Children's Month. Thank you again, everyone. Yan na naman,